Hey everyone, I am back from my India trip. In today's video, I'm going to show you the sketches that I have drawn over there. I'm not sure if you guys have watched the earlier video where I showed you all the drawing supplies, the tools that I was bringing to the India trip. And this is one of the watercolor sets that I brought along. This is the Memory Blue starter set with 6 tubes of color. And I tried out the paints to paint this particular sketch of all the tools that I brought along, and after I painted this, I felt that something was a bit off. The colors, they were not as vibrant when mixed compared to other brands. So I made a last minute decision to bring along another set of watercolor. So this is a set with mostly Daniel Smith watercolor, and this turned out to be a very good move because when I sketched the first 2 sketches in India, I felt that something was really off. This is Undavali Caves. I drew this with pencil and painted over with Memory Blue watercolor. I feel that the colors are a bit flat, and actually the composition works fine. It's just that the use of colors is a bit, it's not as harmonious as I want it to be, especially the greens, which I used this green and mixed with some of the red and the blues to get these colors. It seems like they do not work that well, so it's a bit difficult for me to see what's actually happening here, unless of course if you have seen the place before, then you would probably be able to identify the place, but right now it looks it's a bit off. So I do not know whether it's the paper or if it's the paint. And the same happens here. So this is the second sketch. So after I painted this sketch, I just decided that I should not be using Memory Blue because it's really challenging to get the colors that I want. I actually like this composition because there is this elephant sculpture on this side, and I wanted to contrast this with the background, which is all the plantation and the fields, but the colors did not turn out that well. So this was the last sketch where I used Memory Blue. This was drawn on the same day. I forgot to bring my pen out, which was why I have to use pencils to draw this, and I kinda like this sketch even though it's drawn with pencil. This was drawn at the Vijayawada train station. This was drawn outside the train station, and I had to draw this really fast because the sun was setting. I left this as black and white as well because there's no time to color this. This was also drawn on the same day inside the train station. There were a lot of people sitting on the floor or even lying down, and some dogs, they just came in and just walked around the whole place. It's a very India thing for people to sit around on the floor or just lie around on the floor at train stations, I guess. This sketch was drawn with the Koh-i-Noor magic pencil. I have to say that this magic pencil, it's really useful and it's really fun to use. And it's quite compact, so you can definitely put it inside your pencil case and it works wonders all the time. I wanted to draw this sketch here, but I got the composition wrong. That's why I use this as a draft instead. So this is the actual sketch of a roadside store in this village called Kuragalu. This small store was selling tidbits and also petrol. So some of the villagers, they were sitting around here and talking and chatting with one another. The background is a bit difficult to draw. There were a few motorbikes and the house behind, it's much further away, so everything feels very compressed. But I guess the most challenging thing is to get the colors right and for this particular sketch I have already switched over to using Daniel Smith, so the colors here, they look much more vibrant. The main challenge when it comes to mixing colors for me is to get the skin tones of the Indians right. They are not just darker skin, but the skin color has a warm tone to it, like a brownish warm tone. So for me, I don't think I managed to capture that warm feeling, that warm tone. So that's really difficult for me. For this sketch, I used water-soluble graphite. I used the Art Graph water-soluble graphite. This is actually a bit difficult to use because it's difficult to achieve an even tone. The graphite would just run around and sometimes it can appear to be a bit patchy. So for the specks here, I just used the brush and basically just created the specks by flipping the bristles. This was drawn at this village called Nirukonda. So in India there are a lot of statues. Some are in white, some are in colors, and some are in gold. I heard that for those statues that are in white or colored, that means the person is still alive, but those that are in gold, that means that the person has passed away. This was drawn with me looking upwards at this statue. This was also drawn at Nirukonda. This is the arch in front of the temple that is behind, but I did not visit the temple. This is Mr. Vasu, our driver, talking with the villagers, explaining to them what we were doing there. This was drawn at this village called Velagaputi. So I use ultramarine, the Daniel Smith French ultramarine for the sky, so you can see some sort of granulation. Now this Be Creative watercolor journal is supposed to be cold pressed, but the texture is more on the fine grain type of texture rather than cold press, so textures on it, granulating pigments on it is going to look something like this. Now compare this to actual cold press paper. You can see a stronger pattern here. So the paper that you use will affect granulation, and I don't think that the paper here is that good for granulating paints. These are the power lines at this place. Now the power lines in the future, they will be buried underground, so that's why I wanted to sketch this while the power lines are still above ground, and also captured some of the animals that were walking past, because maybe these animals, the buffaloes, they may not be there in the future in the new city. This is a very typical neighborhood scene. This village is called Nauluru. Now the other challenge, other than the mixing of skin tones, is to basically draw something that is unique, something that is iconic about each village. And most of the houses there, they are all very different, so it's very difficult for us sketchers to capture a particular scene where when you look at that scene, you can immediately tell which village that scene was drawn from. So this is a very typical scene of their neighborhoods. This particular neighborhood is a bit newer because all these buildings, they were built with concrete. Some of the older houses, they were just built with leaves, and some are even makeshift houses like this tent here. This is actually someone's house. There were some clothes hanging outside. So someone or some family was probably staying here inside. There are a few street side stores. This particular one sells vegetables, and it's manned by these two ladies. And this little kid here, I think, probably belongs to one of the ladies. He wasn't wearing any shorts and he was just running around playing with all the vegetables. So of course I had to sketch him in. While we were at the village, some of the villagers told us about this Andhra Cricket Academy, which is a huge stadium that's under construction. And so we decided to drive over there to check out the stadium, and this is one of the sketches that I drew over there. It's a bit difficult to get a good vantage point of the stadium because this stadium actually has scaffolding all around, but I chose not to sketch all the scaffoldings, and much of the site here on the ground here, they are actually blocked off by those construction boards, but again I chose not to draw them. Instead I just drew the stadium as if it has been completed. The stadium is going to be completed in 2018 or 2019. I'm actually quite surprised that there weren't even more temples in India. I always thought that there were a lot of temples in India, but surprisingly for me, we did not find that much temples, or temples that are quite, I would say, monumental or very big or huge or iconic. So for this particular temple, it's called Nigendra Swami Putta. Inside this room there is a huge pile of earth. I think it's earth, but I'm not too sure. Maybe it's concrete. I wasn't able to see very clearly because it was only lit by candle light inside. There's no electricity at all. So it's this big pile of earth or concrete, and that is actually to be prayed. So people would actually pray to that, which I find to be a bit weird. This is another village scene. This is at this village called Venkatapalam. So there is this church here that I sketched. And here's another roadside stall which was open in the morning, but I was walking around the village, and when I came back here, this stall was closed. And this is one of the many Andhra Pradesh police barricade. And while traveling along the road, and while traveling along the road, we saw a school. So we stopped by, and one of the teachers invited us into their school to check it out. And this sketch was drawn while the students were in class. I sat behind them to draw this, and because this classroom, this is actually the classroom, it's open air, some students, they were not able to sit under the shelter, so they had to sit outside under the sky. So this is how their school looks like. This was a very memorable sketch to me because after the class ended, they came over to see what I sketched, and there was a huge commotion. Yeah, so they were surrounding me, trying to get me to film them with my camera, and I had difficulty getting out of the school, so it was really memorable to me. And while driving along the road, we saw this huge statue. It reminded me of Avatar: The Last Airbender because of this pole here, and because, I mean, this guy looks like Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And this was the last sketch that I drew in India, in Vijayawada. This hill behind is called Islampad. I think I forgot to write down the name, which I'm going to write later on. Anyway, I only have 30 minutes to 45 minutes to sketch this, and while I was sketching this, there was this huge buffalo, black and white buffalo, that walked past me, maybe at arm's length, and as it walked past me, it turned its head and looked at me. I think it's trying to I think it's wondering what I'm doing there. So it stared at me for about good 5 to 10 seconds before it turned its head again and moved along down the street. So that was really quite an experience. Unfortunately, I was sketching, I was sitting down, so I wasn't quick enough to be able to get my camera to record all of that. So that memory will now live inside my head and not on a video, but it's really quite an experience. And that's really the fun when it comes to sketching on locations, because things like this, they could happen. You could be walking down the street, you could see some animals, they would stop and look at you, or you could walk down the street, people may invite you, especially in India. They may ask you what you're doing, why are you drawing the place. They may invite you to their house, they may recommend you places to draw, they may even offer you tea. And all those things that I have mentioned, they all happened during this trip. So this was my last sketch in India. I think I probably drew around 15 sketches. I filled up about half of this journal, which has 30 sheets in it. So those are all the sketches that I have sketched in Amaravati, which is beside Vijayawada, India. Those sketches were created to record the villages, to document the whole place before it gets redeveloped into the new capital city. Now I'm going to review this watercolor journal only after I have finished using up all the pages, but right now I can tell you that I am not really that impressed by the paper, mainly because it says that it's cold pressed paper, but the texture on the paper is actually fine grain, and cold press versus fine grain versus hot press, they all react differently with watercolor. As for this set of Memory Blue watercolor, I'm going to test this out further before I give you my final thoughts and review. I only sketched 2 pieces with this color, so I don't think that's enough to give you a detailed review. Sometimes you do need to use the watercolors to really understand the color selection that's inside and to use them properly before you can form any sort of accurate opinion. If you have not watched the earlier travelogue videos that I have created for the Sketching Amaravati project, do check them out, because that's going to give you more context to the sketches that I have created. So thanks for watching today's video. See you in the next one. Bye.